Started. Okay, so welcome to those that are on the webinar with us. Welcome to today's webinar, What You Need to Know About Long-Term Care Planning, presented by Margie Barrie. So a little bit about Margie. Margie is a nationally recognized long-term care expert, specializing in long-term care planning since 1990. Margie has been named one of the industry's top 10 power people by Senior Market Advisor magazine and has one of the top 25 most creative people in the insurance industry by Life Health Pro magazine. She's also co-founder of the Executive Study Council, a group of the top 20 women leaders in the long-term care industry. She has been writing her popular monthly column, LTCI Insider, for over 20 years now, and she's the author of 2 books. She's presently a long-term care planning specialist with ACSIA Partners, the largest long-term care planning agency in the country. A much sought-after speaker, she speaks at numerous industry conferences and provides partnership and other training nationwide. Today, Margie will be covering the 10 realities you need to know about long-term care planning, and we're going to split it up into 3 different parts. So part 1, Margie will be covering why this planning is important. Part 2 is the impact of COVID and the new Medicare changes. And part 3, she'll be talking about looking ahead and what's to come. We will be taking questions after part 1. So if you do have any questions, feel free to write those in the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those at the end, both after part 1 and at the end. Okay, so Margie, I'll kick it off to you. And maybe by starting with the basics. So why don't you start with explaining what you mean when you use the term long-term care planning?
Okay, great. Julie, thank you. And also, I just want to start by saying thank you for inviting me to talk about this topic. It's probably my favorite topic. And I hope that your listeners really do benefit from this conversation. So to start with, when I use the term long-term care, what am I talking about? And to explain it, I'm going to start with a true story about my mother. And so this picture was taken when my mother, she was age 90 and she was in the nursing home for the first time. Now, what my bio did not include was my personal caregiving experience taking care of her during the last 8 years of her life. And she used her long-term care policy a lot, especially at home. But the new responsibility in my life, it started about 9 years ago. I received a call from my brother. My mother lived in Florida. My mother lived in Baltimore, and I live in Florida. And so I received a call from my brother that she had been rushed to the hospital with double viral pneumonia, and I should get up there immediately. So I flew up, and it turned out that the antibiotics they had given her caused the muscles in her groin to become paralyzed, and she couldn't walk. So she recovered from the pneumonia, and the hospital decided to send her to the nursing home to try to teach her to walk. So they sent her to the nursing home. She was there for several weeks, getting a lot of physical therapy, and it didn't work. So they sent her home with a walker and a wheelchair. So then we had to start with the home health care agency. So I was in Baltimore for 2 months dealing with this. Thank goodness her long-term care policy paid all of her expenses. So what these policies do is they provide an income stream to pay for care where you and your family decide the care should be received. So if the person can stay at home, great. If they can't stay at home and they need to go to a facility such as assisted living or nursing home, the policies are going to pay. And the policies are triggered when you need help with what we call the activities of daily living. And so this is basically what you do during the first 40 minutes of the day. So you get up, you get out of bed, you go to the bathroom, you get dressed, you get eat. It's those kinds of situations, or if there's a cognitive impairment like some kind of dementia. So that's what I'm talking about when I use the term long-term care. So when I'm working with clients, my goal really is to answer 2 key questions for them. So the first key question is, does this protection even make sense? Are they better off with or without it? And what are the consequences, particularly for their family, if they don't have it? The second key question is, are the premium and the approach comfortably affordable? So let's start with question one. And I'm going to make it even more specific. I had gotten a call from Robin at your agency, and she asked me about a couple she's working with, and I'm going to call them Alice and Mark. And they're in their mid-50s. Mark is 56, Alice is 54. They have their own business, which is doing very well. They're healthy, thank goodness, so that is not a problem. And they have 2 children, 2 sons. So let's use them as our case study. Okay, so here are the realities that need to be considered. Reality 1, what is the probability of them needing care? So you can see that for women, there's a 79% chance that we're going to need care for almost 4 years. So for all the women who are listening, it's not really a question of if we're going to need the care. It's really a question of when we're going to need it and where we're going to get it. For men, 58% chance for a little over 2 years. So definitely for women, it's a greater concern. Okay, so that's reality 1. Reality 2 is, how much does this care cost? So let's start with home care, and I did it where you're located. So I figured that was a good place to do. And home care is $27.75 an hour. Now these are average costs. Assisted living is $236 a day. Nursing home semi-private is $350, and private is $378. Okay, so Julie, I'm going to use you as an example here. Let's say that you're going to need care for 4 years, because that's pretty much the average for women. So we're going to keep you home for 2, and 1 year of assisted living and 1 year of nursing home. Okay, so in today's dollars, we're talking about a little over $400,000. But that's not our major concern. Our major concern is what's going to happen down the road. Okay, so you're pretty young. But let's say you're going to need care in 25 years. So in 25 years, we're talking about over $800,000, and that's just for you. If you were married, it's going to be even more. So that gives us a ballpark of the numbers that we're talking about. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, now let's move on to reality 3. Okay, and let's use Alice and Mark. Should they self-fund this? Does it make sense for them to take on all of the burden themselves? Or should they use the long-term care insurance to help pay for the care? All right, so I want to go back and use my mother as an example here. Let's see if I can get the pointer working. Great, okay. All right, so we know that my mother was in the nursing home. We know the nursing home said, okay, we can't do anything more for her, and they sent her home. So when they sent her home, we sent her home with a walker and a wheelchair. Okay, so we started with the home care. Now, my mother did have assets. So think about like from 12 o'clock to 9 o'clock as her assets. And her assets were her capital, and her capital was generating her income. Now, all she wanted to do was stay at home. That was it. So we needed to keep her capital intact, because if we started to liquidate it, we would have trouble having her meet her monthly expenses, in addition to the long-term care needs. So we started with the home care. Her bill was running $150 a day for 1 shift of care. Her long-term care insurance policy was paying $120 a day. So there was a $30 a day gap out of pocket, or about $1,000 a month. But because she had the insurance, we never had to liquidate any of her capital, any of her assets. Everything stayed intact. She had choices and control over all her care decisions for the next 8 years. And even though she wasn't happy being in and out of some nursing homes periodically and having somebody to help pay for her, at least it worked. And she did have the best lifestyle that she could provide based on her physical limitations. Now, let's segue to Alice and Mark. Okay, so Mark is older a little bit, he was very smart to marry a younger spouse. Alice is going to be part of his care plan. She's going to help keep him at home. Now, but the thing is that Mark is heavier than Alice, and Alice would have trouble lifting him in and out of the bathtub. And plus, we don't really want Alice to have to stay at home with him for 24 hours around the clock. So Alice is going to need help. But if Mark doesn't have the insurance and they have to start to pull money from their capital, guess who that's going to impact? It's going to impact Alice, because it's going to mean that she has less money down the road to fund her retirement lifestyle. And we want Alice to have the lifestyle that she desires and the lifestyle she deserves. And we don't want her to have to worry about where all this money is going to come from to fund a decent lifestyle. So that's why self-funding is not really a good idea. It's a very risky strategy. Okay, so then you say, okay, so if self-funding isn't a good idea, then the long-term care insurance is a good solution. Now, let's talk about family. I've had some clients say, oh, I don't need this. My kids are going to take care of me. I raised them. They're going to take care of me now. So here's the perspective. Would you rather your kids be able to supervise the care, like I could do for my mother, or would you rather them have to be the ones to maybe give up their livelihoods and help take you to the bathroom, help give you a shower? I mean, there's a dignity situation here. And so really, what role do you want your kids to play? And they will be involved, but I have to tell you, from the daughter of somebody who, as a daughter who went through this with my mother for a number of years, it's much better being able to supervise it and going to Walmart, buying everything that the aide has put on the list and then giving it to the aide to use. Now, here's another interesting perspective. Mark and Alice have 2 sons. I have 2 sons. When my sons got married, I thought I was going to get daughters. I didn't. I got daughters-in-law. They're lovely women, but I have to tell you, I've totally changed my expectations. And so daughters-in-law don't usually raise their hand to say, hey, I'm going to give my mother-in-law a bath or whatever. So if you have sons, this becomes even more important. Okay, now, who should be considering buying long-term care insurance or even looking into it? Well, the best time to buy is somewhere between ages 40 to 59, even to age 70. One of the secrets of the industry is the younger you are when you do this, the less you end up paying over the life of the policy. And so usually when I'm working with somebody who's over age 75, then for the most part, the numbers don't work very well, unless maybe we're doing an annuity and doing a 1035 exchange or whatever. So really, the younger you are, the better off you are. Also, if there's a history of Alzheimer's in your family or even Parkinson's, I was working with a couple there in their 60s, their kids are in the 30s. I'm saying, get this for your kids now, because the carriers are cracking down when it comes to a family tendency towards dementia or Alzheimer's. Okay, next, what about the asset base? Definitely, if you don't have very many assets, like 100,000 or even less than 200,000, you shouldn't do this. What about the maximum? There's a lot. My feeling is that one strategy is if you have over $8,000, you can probably self-fund. But on the other hand, if you have a lot of money, it does make sense to use this insurance because you're taking such a small percentage to protect the rest of it, but also it makes it easier for your kids. Like with my mother, I didn't have to work with her financial planner to figure out which assets to liquidate or anything. I just called the insurance company and said, I'm in trouble, help. So you have to weigh it. But if you have a lot of money, we need to talk about some other strategies there, which does make sense. Also, health. You have to be in reasonably good health to get this policy. When I start working with clients, I first ask them their health questions. I get their health information. I submit it to a pre-underwriting if there's any question about it. So when we meet, I have a pretty good idea of which company has said yes, which company said maybe, or whatever. Also, let's talk about businesses. If you have your own business, you can do an executive carve out and the business can pay for you and your spouse, and you don't have to pay for other employees because this is not part of a cafeteria plan. Also, you can pay for it with an HSA. So there's some interesting strategies here for businesses to pay for it. Okay, now, so then the question becomes, what kind of policy should you be looking at? There's two kinds of policies out there. There's the traditional policy, and then there is the hybrid policy. Now, basically, both provide an income stream where it pays for care at home or an assisted living or nursing home. Now, but let me explain the difference here. For the traditional policy, you pay a premium every year until you use the policy, and then the premium stops because there's a waiver of premium. The premium amount depends on the benefits selected, including the monthly benefit, the benefit length, and the inflation benefit options. And there could be a few rate increases over the life of the policy. And companies that are providing traditional policies are like Mutual of Omaha and Thrivent. Okay, so that's the traditional. Now, what about the hybrid? The hybrid is a more recent development in the long-term care industry. So think of this as two buckets. First bucket is the long-term care bucket. So if you need the money for long-term care, it's there. The second bucket is the life insurance bucket. If you don't use bucket number one for long-term care, your heirs, Mark and Alice's sons, would get the money back that you paid in as a death benefit. So that's really nice. If you don't use the policy, you don't lose the money that you put in. Also, there can't be any rate increases, and one of the companies does offer a joint policy. Now, the downside is, and yes, there is a downside, that the premium is significantly higher. And you can do it as single pay, 10 pay, 20 pay, and there's all different ways to do it. And examples of this kind of policy include like Nationwide, Lincoln, and One America. Now, what I do when working with clients is, first of all, I educate you about this protection so you understand how it works. Then I gather the relevant information, both based on your health and your financial situation. And then I will prepare a proposal that provides a recommendation as to what is going to best meet your needs and your budget. And I'm probably going to show you both variations. This is a very thorough process. It is customized to meet your needs. And we're going to focus on which approach is better for you, and definitely keeping in mind what is comfortably affordable. And we will also be working with your North Star advisor so they can help guide us through in addition. So it's not like, well, like buying a car, like you want red, white, or blue. It's a little bit more intricate and complicated than that, but you're going to end up with a product, a coverage that really works best for you. So that's the big picture here. Okay, now, Julie, do we have any questions so far?
There are no questions so far in the chat box, so you can just keep moving along if you'd like.
Okay, great. Okay, good. All right. So let's talk about the impact of COVID and Medicare, but let's start with COVID. Okay, so we've all had a very interesting year, and COVID has impacted long-term care, as I'm sure you all are familiar with. And it certainly has impacted our lifestyles and our daily lives. And for those who have been in the midst of a long-term care event, they've been particularly vulnerable. And we've all seen the information about the number of people in the nursing homes and what's happening. Okay, but that's just the short term. It's going to go much further. So for those of us who fortunately have our health, we have the freedom to contemplate having a long-term care event down the road, we're also going to be impacted by this. So here's what I did because I wanted to understand the situation better. I sent a survey to 30 of the top people in my industry, and then I prepared a white paper on the topic. And here are some of the research results that are included in the white paper. And this is important because it could impact you and your family. So let's start with the nursing home industry first. As you can imagine, the impact on nursing homes has been catastrophic. Occupancy rates have plummeted. The industry is in deep financial trouble. Revenues have taken a beating. Expenses have increased. Nursing homes are suffering from the loss of lucrative post-acute rehab patients and others who normally would have gone from the hospital to the nursing home to recover from surgery, strokes, and the like. Also, potential long-term care residents are very reluctant to move into the nursing homes. So the key takeaways are that a majority of nursing homes are operating at a loss. And 72% are saying they're not going to be able to sustain operations another year at the current pace. So hopefully the use of the vaccine will help to reverse the situation, but it is somewhat of an unknown. Now, assisted living facilities are also facing similar challenges. Their occupancy rates have also plummeted. Half are operating at a loss. But unlike nursing homes, they have not received any federal funding. So their situation also is very precarious. And 64% of assisted living facilities have said they won't be able to sustain operations another year at the current pace of increased costs and revenue loss. Now, the interesting thing has been the impact on home health care. So more than ever, Americans want to be able to stay at home. They want to be able to age in place. So even before COVID hit, survey results were showing that most of the care was being received at home. And when we talk about designing a policy and what the benefit amount should be, I really do focus on home care because that's where we're seeing most of the care being received. Now, but with COVID, even more Americans want to stay at home because they're afraid of going to a facility. So we'll see how that works out, but we're thinking that the trend towards home care is just going to continue to increase. Now, this is also interesting. What has been the impact on the long-term care insurance industry? Well, first of all, when somebody applies for a policy, they have to go through a medical review or underwriting. So the industry, the underwriters have been very much concerned about the situation with COVID. So if somebody had COVID, there could be a delay from 30 days to 6 months, even a year, depending on the carrier. Even if you were exposed to COVID, there could be a delay. So the carriers have differentiated on it, but there's still, the basic premise has been if you've had COVID, you need to wait. Also, there's a lot of research going on. If somebody has had COVID, what's the impact on dementia? What's the impact on heart disease? All those things that can impact our health down the road. So that's number one. It's also interesting that most of the industry, I've seen it, a significant increase in the number of people purchasing long-term care insurance. You know, many people thought, oh, I'm never going to need this. I'm never going to get sick. I'm never going to age, whatever. Now, one of the messages with COVID is that we are all vulnerable. And people can say, hey, you know what? This could happen to me. And maybe I better do something about that long-term care need. So that has been certainly an interesting development. Okay, now let's move on to reality 8, because this is something that's going to affect virtually all of us, whether we're of Medicare age now or if our parents are of Medicare age. There are Medicare changes going on that are impacting the continuum of care. Now, let's take a step back and say, okay, why? Well, Medicare is in trouble and it has to change. There's 2 reasons. One is demographics and the other is finances. Okay, so let's start with the demographics. The number of Americans over age 65 continues to grow. So we all know that. Okay, what about finances? Medicare is funded from Social Security. So it's being impacted by the number of baby boomers leaving the workforce and retiring. And the next generation isn't making it's like the hefty salaries a lot of baby boomers made. And plus, baby boomers, when they retire, they're going on Medicare. So the bottom line is there's not going to be enough money to continue to fund Medicare as we know it. And who knows what impact COVID is going to be having with the mass unemployment figures that we've seen. That's a whole other issue. But at a time when the need for Medicare funds is expanding, the amount of money funding Medicare is shrinking. Now, here's some interesting numbers. Okay. The spending on Medicare and Medicaid is now a little over $1 trillion. Look what happens by 2023. That's like in a year and a half, okay? That number is expected to increase to 6 trillion. Also, the number of people age 65 is growing at an unbelievable pace. So 35 million in 2000, 71 million in 2030. And the number of people age 80 is also growing exponentially. 9.3 million in 2000, 19.5 million in the year 2030. All of that is going to take its impact on Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. All right, so what Medicare started doing was they started cutting back. So you can see that from 2013, all these cuts have been occurring and they're still going to be occurring. So I thought this was a real eye-opener when I saw this. Now, let's get more specific. All right, Julie, I'm going to use you as an example again, okay, because you're there. All right, here's the process that we're used to. Okay, so Julie, you're going to take your mother to the emergency room, all right? And the doctor's going to run tests and he's going to bill Medicare. Then your mother is going to be admitted to the hospital. Expenses are paid by Medicare. Then your mother leaves the hospital and she goes to a nursing home, skilled nursing facility, because she needs physical therapy or whatever. They're then going to bill Medicare. Then your mother goes home and she receives skilled care. Maybe a physical therapist comes out several times a week. The provider bills Medicare. So Medicare has paid a lot of money for the care episode for your mother. All right, now, what happened was Medicare said, wait a minute, we need to make some changes here. So they changed the payment structure from all those fees with everybody operating in their respective silos to holding the hospital responsible for all the care that an individual needs. So to achieve the cost savings, they took the average total spent per patient and they came up with one number. That number is $18,663. That's how much, Julie, can be spent on your mother from the time that she starts getting sick until the time that she's home and she's discharged. It's called MPSB, or Medicare spending per beneficiary benefit. That's the lump sum that Medicare is going to pay for all the care from the various providers. And the hospital is going to be the one to oversee that. Now, so let me go into another example here. Okay. Say that, Julie, your mother's care has cost $25,000, okay? The hospital is going to lose about $7,000 on your mother. On the other hand, say the hospital is able to hold the costs down and the care only costs $15,000. The hospital made extra money, okay? So they're going to be trying to cut their costs wherever. Okay, now, let's add on some more cost savings here. In 2020, last year, Medicare came up with something they called value-based care. Translated, it means that Medicare is going to provide less services. Okay, so first of all, it means that home health care companies, the ones who will send a physical therapist out to your home, they're getting a lump sum of money no matter how many visits the therapist makes. Okay, so Julie, your mother was in a nursing home. She's now being sent home. And before all this happened, that physical therapist would have come out 3 times a week. Now, because of value-based care, that physical therapist might only come out once or twice a week because the home healthcare agencies getting the same amount of money no matter how many times. So they're going to cut back on sending out that physical therapist. Okay, now next, the average length of stay in a hospital is way down. The hospital wants to get you out as quickly as possible. Also, they don't really want to send you to the nursing home because they want to be able to make more money and they don't want to have to pay all that money out. All right. In addition, Medicare has hired a third-party contractor to determine the legitimacy of each person's hospital admission. So if they figure that a person's hospital stay isn't justified, the hospital is penalized by losing all the reimbursement for that patient's hospital stay. And the contractors receive compensation for each invalid hospital stay they find during an audit. So, and Medicare is certainly not done making these cuts. They're going to continue. Now, we keep hearing about the federal government, okay, and Biden's American Jobs Plan. We know that Biden is concerned about it, and they've come up with this concept. It's really for those on Medicaid who are on welfare, meaning you have to spend down all your assets. So for those on welfare, it might work out a little bit better. There's long waiting lists or whatever. So really for you all, thank goodness Medicaid is not a good option anyway. So to realize, don't depend on the government to provide this because it's not going to happen. All right, now, so Julie, let's go back to your mother again. What's going to be the impact on you, your family, and your mom? Okay, the first one has to do with the admitted versus observation situation. Now, let me tell you what happened with my mother, and this is really how I found out about it. Okay. My mother is in the emergency room and she's on oxygen and everything. And the hospital comes in and they say to me, we're going to put your mother into a room. We're going to keep her here for several days, do some tests and everything. And then they say to my mother, Maxine, sign this paper. And the paper says, you understand that you're going to be here on an observation status for at least 24 hours. And I say to my mother, stop, don't sign it. Because if she had signed that paper and then she had to go to a nursing home for rehab, Medicare would not have paid. And because in order for a nursing home to get reimbursed by Medicare, you have to have been in the hospital on an admitted status for at least 3 days. So one of the things that we're going to be offering as part of the information we're going to be sharing afterwards, I wrote an article on this. As I'm sitting in the emergency room with my mother with my laptop, I'm typing up what is going on. This is such important information for you, for your loved ones, anybody who's on Medicare, because otherwise, if she ends up in a nursing home, you're going to have to pay for it out of pocket. Okay, so that's number one, lesson one. Number two, hospitals are going to be discharging patients prematurely. By prematurely, I mean that they're going to be getting them out quicker. So just be aware that the stay in hospitals is going to be lessened. Also, nursing homes are going to be financially motivated to discharge patients sooner. So the past expectation was, okay, you go there, you're going to be there for several weeks. Now the average is 5 to 7 days. Let me tell you why, and this is really interesting. Okay, Julie, I'll use your mother again. Okay, so Julie's mother, she's in the nursing home, and for the first 4 days, that nursing home, and she's getting physical therapy, the nursing home is getting, say, $600 a day for her care. on day 5, the reimbursement for Medicare is cut back to $400 a day. Now, because the nursing home has a lot of expenses, they're losing money at that point. So their goal is going to be to get Julie's mother out of there and bring in somebody else where they're going to get that $600 a day. So it's all monetarily based. Okay, so they send her home. Well, she's going to need much more care. She's going to need much more help. And who does the burden fall on? The burden falls on the family. I have to tell you, I have a friend who just had a hip replacement. It used to be you would go to the nursing home for a hip replacement. No, they sent her right home. So that's why the insurance, long-term care insurance, is even more important, because otherwise you're going to need help to pay for that care at home. And either you bring somebody in from an agency or the family has to do it. So that's the impact that you need to be expecting. Okay, moving on here. The reason that this makes sense, and the reason that insurance, certain kinds of insurance is really important, is to protect your savings, to protect your assets, to protect your lifestyle. Okay. There's only 4 things that could involuntarily wipe out your assets. So that's the role of insurance. Okay, so the first one is the odds of your home having a fire. So you see this one little red square right there, not a lot, but I'm thinking everybody is listening, you are not going to drop your homeowner's insurance. Okay, that's one. The second is the odds of your car being totaled. Not a lot, but you know what? You're not going to drop your car insurance anyway. You can't. All right. The third is the odds of being hospitalized. Hopefully all of you listening are very healthy and you haven't been in the hospital, but we all know people who have. And obviously it's inevitable that at some point, almost all of us are going to be in the hospital. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the odds of needing long-term care. So the logic becomes, if you use insurance to protect yourself here, here, and here, doesn't it make sense to use insurance to protect yourself here? And that's why my clients are doing that. And that's why in working with your North Star financial advisor, they're saying, hey, have you done your long-term care planning yet? Because it's a very scary proposition if you haven't, particularly for women. Okay, now let's look ahead here. Okay, so I started with a story about my mother, and I'm going to end with one. So last February, I had a big party for her. She was 99, and that's a picture of her. She's looking good. And she died about 3 weeks later. And what happened was she fell in her apartment. She didn't use the walker. I kept yelling her to use the walker. We always argued about it. And she fell and she suffered a brain bleed and a stroke. So thank goodness my mother did have her long-term care policy. So, and I'm saying that for 2 reasons. First of all, she always worried about money. She always did, even though she did have assets. But because she had the long-term care insurance, her assets remained the same. Actually, they grew. And I never had to worry about which assets to liquidate. Everything stayed intact. And it's difficult dealing with an aging parent. A lot of decisions to be made, a lot of doctor's visits and things like that. But at least the stress of knowing that I didn't have to worry about the money, that was huge. Second, she was totally determined to have choices and control over how and where she was going to age. She was determined to stay at home forever. And the policy enabled her to do that. I would just call the insurance company and say, hey, my mother's back on claim, and the money was started coming. And so she had the lifestyle that she desired and really that she deserved. If my mother hadn't had the insurance, most of her money would be gone. We had a lot of home health care over those 8 years. And I have to tell you, it's stressful enough taking care of an aging parent. just imagine the stress if you also had to worry about the money. That's why I absolutely believe in this protection. I mean, I've lived it. And this is where reality 10 comes in. I urge you to plan ahead. Okay, and here's some interesting facts. Here were some interesting surveys. Lincoln Insurance Company, they did a survey among women, and 98% of women agree that families should discuss plans on how to pay for long-term care before it's needed, but fewer than half have done so. Also, I thought it was interesting about the comments that they made about having their children involved. 65% felt that children should not feel obligated to provide care. 54% would be embarrassed if their kids did provide care. And 69% would be hesitant to even ask their children to provide the care. Also, fact two, Genworth, another insurance company, they did a survey pertaining to COVID and financial planning. And 73% said they intend to make changes to their lives as a result of COVID to do both better financial planning and also better health habits. So please take the time to learn about this. Talk to your financial planner at North Star. You may decide it doesn't make sense. You may decide that it does make sense, but at least you have figured it out. And because this is such an essential part of retirement and financial planning. So do your homework and take the time to figure it out. So that's the basic explanation here of why it's so important to plan ahead. So Julie, I now turn this back to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for all of this great information. It's certainly a lot to think about. And what we've done, it doesn't look like there's any questions in the chat box. And so Margie has included a long-term care request form, which I've uploaded to the chat box, that anybody interested can fill out. Margie covered a lot of information. And so she has some white papers, a Medicare white paper, a document that goes into the admitted versus observation status a little bit more. If you're interested in that, she would be happy to send it to you. And so if you fill that out, Margie has also wanted to make it a little bit more fun. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what you're offering if folks return the form to you. Was it by the end of the week?
I did Monday, Monday by end of the day. So they have the weekend. Yeah, I thought it would be fun. So the gift is an umbrella. I mean, everybody can use an extra umbrella. And the reason I selected that is that's what I'm sort of using for my branding, and I have it on my thank you notes. And so the message is prepare for the inevitable. When it rains, use your umbrella. And when your health changes, use your long-term care insurance. So that's why, and I have both umbrellas for men and women, whoever wins this drawing. So I thought that would be fun.
There are a few questions coming in. So a question about getting more information about how to find an insurance provider and find out some costs. And so if you are working with a North Star advisor, it's best to start there as far as talking to your advisor about what it is you're looking for and having those conversations, and we can help you kind of piece together those steps. And either way, please feel free to reach out to us for first steps. Somebody else is saying, thank you. The information is really helpful and loving the pictures of your mom. And somebody else asking about discussing supplemental health care in addition to Medicare.
You mean like a Medicare supplement?
Yes, I think because you covered so much of the Medicare, I assume this is somebody asking about the supplemental coverage for Medicare. I don't know if, I don't know if that plays in at all.
Good question. In order for a supplement to kick in, Medicare has to have paid something. So the supplement supplements Medicare. So like for the nursing home part, if Medicare isn't going to pay, your supplement's not going to kick in either. So that's how that works. And basically Medicare and your supplement do a great job of covering hospital bills and doctor bills. Does a really poor job of covering long-term care, both of them. So don't look to them for do that.
Great, thank you for answering that. And somebody asking about emailing the form. Yes, we have the email addresses for everybody attending the webinar today, so we'd be happy to email that form out as well. Well, we did really well on time today. And Margie, we certainly all appreciate your time and all the great information that you provided for us today. If anybody has any further questions, please feel free to reach out to myself. My email address is julie@northstarfp.com. Or Margie, do you want to give everybody your email address as well?
It's on the form, and actually, let me see, I think I have it here. It's right there.
Great, so you can reach out to Margie if you have any questions directly for her. We appreciate your time today. And this webinar will also be, it's being recorded and it will be stored on our website and emailed out separately. So thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.